Hello everyone, welcome to MJ Hobby Corner. I am Martin. I will be your host in this video. So first things first, this is going to be a video about some of my past sculpting work. I'm going to give a very brief history, and then I want to talk about armatures and basically what is the future of my sculpting as I began working with clay again. And where can people get, some of the information and tips and things like that I've come up with. All of that information will be in this video. Now, this is not a how-to video per se. Those will come later, and many of my scratch building tutorials these days are in my magazine, Scratch Builder Monthly. You can find that in my Patreon shop. It is a public shop. You don't have to be a member of my Patreon in order to get anything that I write from there, and also in War Games Vault. Okay, now that being said, I have been working a lot more on my Patreon. That's going to be true this year. My Patreon really needed it, and one of the things that I've done is to actually, there are something like 600 videos on my Patreon, just like there are over 1,000 videos on this channel. And Patreon now has the option that you can organize your videos into playlists, or what they call collections. And that means that a lot of older videos that were buried, that many of my newer patrons probably didn't even know about, all those videos can now surface. They can go on collections, and patrons, new patrons, old patrons alike, can now see them at their leisure, because the videos are much more organized. So that's something that takes time, and I've been working a lot on doing that. So a little bit of history. First and foremost, I am a hobbyist. I enjoy sculpting very much, and I'm coming at you from an experienced hobbyist, but also someone that has experience selling their art. I used to sell my artwork, particularly my wildlife art. And if you want to see more on my wildlife art, my past art, I have collections of photos in my Instagram. I have tons and tons of photos on Instagram. Artist.junko is the handle, and there you will see a lot of the wildlife dioramas and all kinds of things that I came up with while sculpting these figures in order to sell in craft fairs. I had an Etsy shop. I also sold on Facebook. You can go on the Critter Creator page, which is on Facebook. And that was pretty much my little business platform. And I sold figures for quite some time. Now, I got into making dogs. Here's an example of a dog, because I love dogs and cats. And I started making people's memorials, dog memorials for people. They would send me their photographs of their fur babies, and I would very respectfully work my hardest to make their dog. Now, unfortunately, two things happened. One is my dear dog, Sierra, passed away. This was right before the great Panini. YouTube doesn't like it when we mention that time, but you know that's when we were all at home looking for things to do. Before that, about a few months before that, my dog died, and that put a sort of a sour taste in me, myself, and I still kept sculpting dogs for people. In fact, I was working on a memorial for someone when she passed away, and so that put a dent in things. But also, I had severe heart failure shortly after that, and that really pretty much ended that hobby, okay? The channel has started by then, but my business was pretty much done with. So I started sculpting as a hobby. I said, I'm going to make figures for my games because A, it is the ultimate form of scratch building. And B, I can make figures whichever way I want them to look, like that. I just want to make figures. That's it, you know? And that's what I started doing. This is some weird crustacean dude for Deep Wars, the game Deep Wars. And that's what I did for the channel, and that's what I started doing very recently. Okay, these are all examples of figures that I've made over the years, and this is more of a presentation figure. It's not so much a gaming figure as a photo prop, right, to have for maybe a role-playing game or something like that. But I have quite a few examples of a variety of clay figures that I've made here on this channel. Most of my stuff is going to be on Patreon, but I do have talks and things here on the channel that talk about making armatures. Here's a large Styracosaurus. Unfortunately, he broke. This figure is over 8 years old now, and I used a couple of things. I used, first of all, a heavy-duty armature for this figure. Now, I used hanger wire for the armature, and but similar thing, I beaded the wire with floral wire, and just like you'll see in one of the armatures that's coming up. And then I used tinfoil filler. I actually sculpted, added pieces of tinfoil to mimic some of the muscle and the stomach, and filled everything nicely with the tinfoil, then started adding my clay. And this was a mix of clays, Super Sculpey firm clay mixed with Procreate clay, mixed with Aves clay, which is a resin clay that comes in like these little tubs. You can get them. And I got them all at Amazon. And the ratios of my clay varied depending on what I was trying to do. I had different recipes for mixing different clays, but very commonly it was, if I'm making a little clump of sculpting medium, I would do, let's say, 2 parts of Sculpey baking clay, the firm kind, and then I would mix 1 part of Procreate, and I would mix 1 part of Aves. Mix that all together, and then it would make my sculpting medium, and that's what I would add to the armature. Okay, Aves can be a little bit sticky too, so it was good that way. So, yeah, that's one example. And then here's another example, dragon, which I made a long time ago. He's already starting to show signs of wear and tear because he is an older figure, but yeah. Navy ships and spaceships are also, you can also make them out of clay, and they require different construction, but they are very possible. And these are clay warships. I made a whole fleet of these right here on the channel, and also spaceships. Cormorants are a favorite bird of mine, and I wanted to sculpt the cormorant, drying its feathers. These diving birds generally have less oil on their feathers than other birds, and so their feathers do get soaked in water when they dive, so they have to come out and dry their feathers. Unfortunately, this bird was knocked out. My kitties knocked it off a shelf, and it broke in many areas. So, yeah, you could see the clay coming off, which is unfortunate. Bad kitties, bad kitties. But this was my first attempt at actually making feathers. And in fantasy, this is a great skill to have, because we can use a lot of wings, and wing types and wing shapes in our fantasy figures. So I don't know what I'm going to keep this in a safe place, even if it's broken up and smashed. That's okay. I'll keep it as a way of looking back into it, so when I do more wings, I have a reference material. Here's another dog, Halloween dog, with a little felt witch outfit. There's so much you can do with clay. I mean, clay is a great material. So my patrons will probably recognize this. This is my sample binder. This is a collection of, well, a ton of different skeletons. And I have a background in wildlife biology and ecology, so this stuff was very familiar to me. But that's not to say that you have to know like every single like term and all that stuff. No, very general. How do bones fit together, and how you make a skeleton out of wire that you can then use for sculpting. You don't have to know like all the terms or be a biologist or anything like that. You're just using this material as a way of looking at how skeletons are posed, you know, in different environments, different motions, right? One of the things that I did, notice how this diagram, this is a lemur skeleton. Notice how this diagram, I have different sizes of creatures. One of the things that I would do in the past is I would take my wire and I would, and I'm a little bit rusty, okay, because I haven't done this in a while, but I would very roughly bend my wire according to this skeleton. Now this one is very small, so I would have to use a wire that's a little more pliable. And then when I was doing my backbone, I would do the same thing. I would basically shape it according to what I saw in the skeleton. And then I would have a rough idea of how these appendages work. In fantasy, we have a lot of animals. We have a lot of creatures that we make, and basically what I do is by learning this stuff, just learning the basic shapes of all the skeletons, I can start a fantasy creature very easily. I can add additional limbs and I can add an additional head if I want to. This is the starting point, and from there I can add a myriad of different things to make my creature a fantasy creature. I do not sculpt humans. I suck at sculpting humans, but I do note the humanoid shape because that can be very important for humanoid monsters. It's good to know the humanoid shape. And I make my wires a little bit different these days, but this is a good and excellent diagram for, you know, these kinds of things. And also the skeletons allow me to look at bone shapes. So if I want to make an undead creature, you know, I can. And so Critter Creations, that was my Facebook page. It's still up. You can still visit it. It's inactive, but that's where I used to sell most of my stuff. And I have a wealth of information in that page. I'm going to be removing photographs from there and putting that on my Patreon so anyone interested in sculpting can see that work, because that was like 2 years or 3 years of work that I don't want wasted, even though it was concentrated only on animals. Okay, so we're putting a light background there so we can see. So these are the new wires that I've made, and this is a multi-part wire here. This is a humanoid wire. Notice the S-shaped backbone curve here. And this is a new way that I'm experimenting with using paper clips. And I have the legs here are separate from the torso and chest. And then the arms are also separate. Now, the arms are very long because I may have weapons coming out of the arms. I'm not sure yet. This is going to be a Deep Wars figure. This probably some kind of biomech, and that's why it's a big figure. So that's what I'm going to do with that. And then, of course, we have the dino, which I may put a rider on him. Yeah, I may put a rider on him. But notice the S-shaped neck with this sort of dip in here. And this is not, none of this is, you know, purely anatomical correct. I make a lot of changes based on what I want the figure to look like. So, and then here, the paper clip ends right around here. And then I add an extension of tail using the fluoro wire. So there's a lot of ways to correct your armature as you go to add extensions to your armature if you feel the tail is too short, or simply just make up another creature, make up, a dinosaur with a much shorter tail, and, put a club at the end, put spikes at the end, whatever you want. So, you'll see what these armatures become in the future. And definitely, if you want to help support the channel, check out the magazine on my Patreon shop. Check out Patreon. We have a lot of stuff going on there now. And yeah, I'm going to start sculpting again, little by little this year. I'm going to start making my own figures again. And as I said, there's just a lot of satisfaction in using something that I made in my games, and I make a lot of stuff for Julie as well, my wife. She will be coming back to gaming eventually. Okay. All right, folks. Talk to you very soon. There's a lot more. There are many more examples of figures I have made. Look up the playlist Sculpting with Green Stuff here on YouTube. That has a lot of the older videos. Many of those videos are going to be going to my Patreon. All right, so those are older videos that will also be viewed on my Patreon. I do talk about wires and how I made the different wires, etc., etc. Look for new articles because I am learning new things as always. And look for new articles in Scratch Builder Monthly. There's going to be a clay section now, including a new RPG section and all that in the magazine. Of course, all of that depends on my health. So, talk to you guys very soon. See you in the next one. And be safe. And more importantly, enjoy your games. All right? Enjoy your games and your crafts. Have a good one.